Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Hamilton, and I'm the Chief Executive of Belfast Chamber. You're all very, very welcome to this morning's event, which is entitled Growing a Green City. Today's event is part of the React Festival, which has been running across Belfast over the past week or so and has been organised by our friends at the Linen Quarter Business Improvement District. And I just want to take a moment to say well done and congratulations to Chris McCracken and the team at Linen Quarter Bid for organising the festival. Our event this morning is going to focus on how cities like Belfast can be transformed from being car-dominated, post-industrial places to green, sustainable, environmentally friendly, people-centered cities with quality of life at their core. And we're going to focus on the excellent example of the Norwegian capital of Oslo. Oslo is consistently rated as a great place to live in indexes produced by the likes of Mercer and Deutsche Bank. It has been ranked also as the second healthiest city in the world and was Europe's green capital back in 2019. So to tell us a little bit more about Oslo's transformation and hopefully help us to learn some lessons for Belfast, we are delighted that we are joined this morning by Victoria Marie Evanson, who is the Vice Mayor for Business Development and Public Ownership in the city of Oslo. A trained copywriter, and Victoria has worked as a creative leader in the advertising industry and has been an Oslo City Councillor for the Norwegian Labour Party since 2011, and she's previously chair of the city's Development Committee. Victoria, you're very, very welcome. Victoria is going to very, very shortly give a presentation about the transformation of Oslo, and then we'll have a little bit of time afterwards for some questions. So please use the question and answer function, which is at the bottom of your screen, if there's anything that Victoria says that you want to ask a little bit more about. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand over to you, Victoria. You're very welcome. We are delighted that you've been able to join us this morning, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon, and what a wonderful introduction. It's very grateful to be introduced in such a manner. So now I'm just going to try the share screen thing again and see if I succeed with that. It looks like that on my screen, so I hope it looks like that on your screen as well. So thank you so much for this invitation. It's great to be able to meet in this way, and I think this is one of the good things that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought us. It's easier now to have a dialogue across the borders and with the cities that we need to talk with. So that is actually a good thing post-pandemic. So as Simon said, I've been invited to give a short presentation of the Fjord City program and the transformation of the waterfront in Oslo and how we work with becoming a greener city. And firstly, I would like to say that I have been informed that, like Oslo, Belfast is a proud port city with an industrial past. And for cities like ours, when our shipyards move elsewhere and people move in, the question arises, how can we reclaim our seafront for humans while still maintaining an efficient port? And that is one of the things that I will touch upon today. So I would like to say I think that Oslo is an extraordinary city in many ways, as is the nature surrounding the city, the hills, the mountains, the woodlands of Oslo, and the fjord. I would say that nature is a part of our urbanity. And people living in Oslo are not citizens and urban dwellers on the average or in the same way as, say, New Yorkers or Londoners, because Oslo is a diverse city, and the most typical Norwegian cliche of all is something that would, I would say, describe very many of the people living in our city. And that is that the ultimate experience for Norwegians, regardless if the weather is good or bad, is to leave the city for outdoor life in the mountains and stay overnight in a cabin. And this is perhaps why we mostly walk on top of our new opera house. The Oslo Fjord is a fantastic resource for our entire population. It's clean, accessible, and adapted for active usability, without compromising when it comes to biological diversity. For us, it is important that the islands, beaches, and shore are available for everyone living in the city. And quality pays off. However, the aspect of accessibility should not be underestimated when we move forward. In constructing urban areas, we have to take into account that people are supposed to live their lives in these areas. The Fjord City is an urban renewal project that started more than 20 years ago. The renewal entails fundamental change and new architectural additions on the city's waterfront. In order for this to be possible, we've had to organize the cargo port into a smaller and more efficient area just outside the city center. Efficient port management is crucial in order to free space. At this stage, we have opened the waterfront to the public, and the main part of the transformation is completed. Okay, now I have some technical difficulties, actually. There it is. Okay, so a few words about the city of Oslo. It is, as mentioned, the capital of Norway, and it's located in the inner end of the Oslo Fjord in eastern Norway, as indicated on the map. Oslo is Norway's largest city with a population of around 700,000 inhabitants. If you also include the areas around Oslo, the greater Oslo region has a population of about 1.5 million people. As the photo indicates, it can get a bit chilly during the winters, but we are pleased with easy access to nature, which is a good thing, both during winters and summers. In 2019, Oslo was the European Green Capital. The European Green Capital helped us boost our ambitious environmental policies. The city of Oslo has ambitious climate goals. We will cut greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by 2030. We will cut the total energy consumption. We will strengthen the city's ability to withstand climate change. We will reduce the city's climate footprint. And these are ambitious goals that we believe is also realistic and doable. However, achieving these goals requires efforts in all sectors. We will increase the share of travel by public transportation, bicycling, and walking. We must reduce the car traffic, which can be controversial. We want climate-friendly goods and utility transport. The port of Oslo will be emission-free. We will have high resource utilization with more reuse and recycling and less waste. And we need to realize carbon capture at the waste-to-energy plant here in Oslo. Our most important governance tool to create a low-carbon city is our climate budget. Oslo was actually the first city in the world to have a climate budget. It was presented for the first time in 2016. The climate budget has the same structure as the ordinary city budget, and it's fully integrated with the municipal budget. The impact of each measure is estimated, and the responsible unit for implementation is identified. The budget clearly states what has to be done, by whom, when, and at what cost. The measures and instruments are closely monitored, and progress is reported on throughout the financial year. The city of Oslo has driven new product development by setting new standards by using innovative procurement, such as zero-emission building sites and fossil-free machinery. But we can't do this alone. We have to collaborate with the industry to make it happen. The focus on green growth and job creations are even more important now due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we work cross borders to join forces with other cities and clusters to ensure innovation and competitiveness. In the city of Oslo, we believe that future value creation will take place in knowledge-intensive businesses and their innovative ways to take advantage of new materials, technologies, and processes. To meet this future, Oslo and Norway must become better at transforming knowledge into innovative products and services. Even before the pandemic, we saw the need for solutions for an aging population, climate and environmental change, and the need for new jobs in a time of rapid technological development and change. And this is actually quite crucial, I think, because Oslo is small enough to be a test lab for new solutions, but big enough to see those solutions being scaled up. In this way, our actions and policies do not only lead to change locally and within Norway, but also travel abroad and inspire changes around the world. Okay, so now we will move on to the Fjord City. This urban development project started in 2000, and the plan was ready in 2008. Since then, we have facilitated and opened the fjord to the people. Today, we see the result. It opens up the scenery surrounding the water. The areas along the shore are significantly more accessible to both residents and visitors. The area around the main station, Norway's busiest public transport hub, have been completely transformed by the Fjord City plan. From heavy traffic and port activity to 5,000 apartments and 20,000 jobs and cultural institutions, restaurants, and so on. And in October this year, the new Munch Museum opened in Bjørvika. Edvard Munch, as you may know, is a Norwegian painter. He is, amongst other things, known for the Scream. And the city of Oslo inherited his art, so we have built him a new museum, which we are immensely proud of. And in July this year, we also opened the new city beach, placed next to the Opera House in front of the Munch Museum. And it has proven to be very popular. And now we feel a little bit like Barcelona. The program for Bjørvika is not completed. We're going to build a new school, a fire station, and some other projects. To the left, in east direction, there will also be a new residential property development, Grønlia, which you can see in the picture down below from the woody hills. So there's still a lot to do, even though we've come a far way with the Fjord City plan. In 2003, the Port of Oslo sold Tjuvholmen to developers. The scale marked an important milestone for the Fjord City. Following a competition to create a concept, investors and architects worked on proposals to develop the area. The Port of Oslo donated almost half of the funds it received from the sale as a gift to the city. And these funds helped to finance the Astrup Family Museum on the right side of this slide. As we reclaimed the seafront, we got a new port promenade. Covering almost 6 miles, it's one of the longest harbor walkways in the world. The promenade and harbor provide excellent views of the fjord, access to maritime cultural history and the Akershus fortress. And when we've transformed this area, former harbor installations such as storehouses and indeed sheds have become restaurants, bar, and office space. So it's not necessarily a matter of emptying the city of workspace just for recreation and housing. The industrial workspace with industrial jobs have given way to new jobs in other sectors. Oslo is still Norway's largest port city, and we are proud of our long maritime heritage. The Port of Oslo is Norway's largest container terminal and trade in fuels, grains, road salt, building materials, cement, and concrete. As a multi-purpose port with all passenger and cargo segments, the Port of Oslo truly can be the place for innovation and development. The municipality owns the port, and the city and port together made an action plan supported by the City Council to reduce 85% of the CO2 emissions by 2030, baseline 2017. And we aim for zero emissions by 2050. We have moved the cargo port out of the city center further south, but still it is in Oslo. This requires more efficient use of space by the Port Authority, something that we believe that they have managed well. I would also like to point out that port cities are lucky in the way that we can reduce emissions by shifting cargo from land-based trucks to seagoing vessels. This alone will reduce total global emissions from transport, and is really important when we talk about climate changes. Since the port is close to residential and recreational areas, there have been a need for buffer zones around the port. We do not want this to be dead spaces, so we have filled the spaces with parks and recreational facilities. And here you see a few examples of that. So in conclusion, a before and after slide. As I hope you've seen through this presentation, our city has been transformed. We're very proud of the change, and I hope this has motivated you for a long weekend in Oslo. Thank you so much for the attention.
Victoria, thank you very much. I think that lots of really useful information about the transformation and regeneration of Oslo, but as you said at the end, I suspect that there might be an increase in the number of city breaks to Oslo being taken by people from Belfast over the next while. That final slide, I think, kind of nicely sort of summarised the challenge that Oslo faced, which is a similar one to Belfast, that port city, a waterfront dominated by industry in the past, and we're going through similar changes and transformation, and Belfast Harbour are at the forefront of doing that. But you know, to create a sustainable city and a city which is, you know, higher levels of quality of life, you know, that was a big moment, obviously, for Oslo when it decided that it wanted to. Looking at those pictures of 20 years ago, there was a pretty large highway running right around the port. So, you know, that was a big decision. How was that decision taken? How did it? How was it received? Was it controversial? Was there broad political support, broad business support, broad societal support to reclaim the waterfront in the way that you have?
Well, in the beginning, obviously, there was a lot of debate, and you know, the port is important to a port city. So there was discussions about how to manage the port and how to not lose the port, because it's important for us to have that in the city. But after those discussions calmed down, I think there's been a really broad political and public support for the transformation, and a lot of obviously interest from businesses and developers, because these are very lucrative areas to develop. And that is maybe also one of the challenges when it comes to housing, because the apartments and the residential areas have become quite expensive, because obviously they are perfectly located and you have the view that everyone wants. So that is actually an issue that we are discussing now, how when we develop the rest of the Fjord City, how can we make sure that there's housing for everyone, regardless of income? And that's one of the discussions that we will dig into moving forward, I think. But the Fjord City is supported by everyone, and I think that we also have seen during the pandemic, when, you know, no one has traveled anywhere, and also we have the strictest restrictions in Norway, and we were basically in our city for months. And then you also saw how important the areas in the Fjord City and other parks and recreational areas were, because we needed somewhere to be and somewhere to play and have activities that we normally travel outside of the city or to other countries to do. So I think that it's proven to be a really important thing for quality for our inhabitants, and also obviously it's been important for us when it comes to tourism and how to brand Oslo.
Yeah, I think the housing point is a question that we've got from Roy White about, you know, you can see the attractiveness of living in that location, and it sounds like what you're saying is that there's been no difficulty in developing and selling housing to those who are maybe slightly better off, but maybe a little bit more challenging for families and those on lower income. So it's interesting that you're saying that that's something that you're trying to get to grips with. Is there what are you looking at? Because again, this is a Belfast city centre residential population is quite low, and it's an ambition of the cities to grow that substantially for lots of different reasons. So we're keen on those sorts of lessons as to how you avoid falling into those types of traps. Have you any advice, and what are you looking at in terms of trying to get families back into the waterfront area?
Well, it is obviously difficult, and it depends, I think, also on the legislation in different countries. And in Norway, we have a planning legislation that is actually quite limited. So we are exploring how we can change that and demand social housing up to maybe 25% in a new project. That would be something that would help, I think. But also how we can use other tools. We're looking into maybe a business co-owned by the city of Oslo and private developers to invest in apartments to help people get into the housing market. So we're looking at a different number of things, but it's really important for us that we manage to keep all sorts of people in our city centers. And I think that's one of the issues that you see in other major cities, London being a really bad example, New York, Paris, that there are only space for the really wealthy ones, and we don't want to get there. So we are exploring our options, but it's really difficult. Yeah,
no, it is, you're right. It's one of those challenges that and balances that cities have to strike as they increase their residential populations, and so it's interesting to hear that you've been grappling with some of the same issues that we are concerned about in Belfast. And you're right, you want to get that mix of people living in the heart of the city, and that that's where that issue around outdoor space, I think, is fascinating too. You've a question from Dr. Saul Golden, who's an academic at Ulster University, and it's about that balance between what is prime development land and creating that public space. And I think it's fascinating how you have ensured that there's that promenade, that port promenade, as you called it, and then those. I think the beach is fascinating. A bit like Belfast. Oslo's not the sort of city you would associate with the beach, but it looked like it was being pretty well used in that picture. And so that kind of trade-off, almost you could call it, that balance between keeping spaces like that for public use as open areas, as you said, accentuated as an asset during the pandemic. Has that, but obviously those decisions predated the pandemic. If you were taking those decisions now, you would absolutely do that. But was there a challenge as well in doing that at the time, and saying, no, we want to create this space, we want to have these beaches, we want to have this promenade space, we want to have this area for walking and cycling? Was that something that there was, again, a bit of a challenge in ensuring, or did the city as a whole say, no, that's what we want? If we're going to transform the waterfront, then it needs to look like that. It needs to be an active space for people.
I think that's actually one of the things that's there's been not that much debate about, because it's really important, and I think it's quite important for all Norwegians, and not as something that we use our political debates on. We need these areas to be accessible to people, and not only to those who are fortunate enough to work there or have the money to buy an apartment there. And I think that's also exemplified by, we have the Monk Museum, as I mentioned, we have the opera, and obviously those are institutions that you buy a ticket for. But we also have our new public library, which is open to everyone, and it's been awarded the best public library in the world, which we are really, really proud of. And when you have the public library, and you have the public beach, and you have the port promenade, and you have places for kids to play, and you have the cultural institutions like Munch and the opera, and then you have businesses and restaurants and housing, and then you get quite a good mix. And I think that's really one of the key successes in the Fjord City, that there's been a focus on that mix and having different sorts of institutions located at the same in the same spaces. So there's something for everyone.
Yeah, and I think we've probably all seen the images before of the Opera House, and you were seeing people walking over the top of it. It has become a public space, yeah, in itself. And the library is, if anybody hasn't seen the library, it's not that old. It's quite new as well, isn't it? And, yeah. And if anybody hasn't seen it, take a look, and it's a fascinating space, and it's a library, yes, but it seems to be a place for people to come together in the city as well. It's not just for the borrowing of books, it's somewhere for people to come together and use.
It's a place, absolutely, it's a place to meet, and we have a small cinema, there's a restaurant, there's about 1,300 chairs of different kinds, so you can sit down to study or just to read a book or a newspaper. You can borrow meeting rooms, and there's a lot of different kind of attributes at the public library, which is important because it's supposed to be a democratic arena.
It's a good way to put it, and I think that that's going back to Saul's question, there's that. I think that's an interesting way in which Oslo has balanced that. Having that key space on the waterfront, both used as both kept open as open space for people to enjoy as they want, but also to put those iconic buildings, which are psychologically symbolic for a city that wants to put itself on the map. But it's still, they're public buildings, they're iconic buildings, but they're public buildings as well. They're not just closed off to the general public. So I think that's an interesting balance that you've struck. Can I mention? I want to go a topic that you mentioned as described as controversial, and it doesn't matter whether it's Oslo, Belfast, or wherever you are in the world. It's a controversial subject. And James Mulligan has asked a question about this as well, around persuading people to. It's really about becoming more less car dominant, and I know that Oslo has pursued over a period of time a policy of making some streets car free, removing on street car parking. And obviously that is something that I think we all understand is controversial, and you have done that, and you've done that as a city over a long period of time. I think I'm right in saying, and it has been also being matched by significant investment in public transport. So how was that planned out? What were discussions with the business community in the city and other stakeholders like to persuade them that in the long term this was something that was beneficial? And what sort of benefits has it brought to Oslo to not remove cars completely, but to make some streets less car dominated?
I think you described it quite well. It's been controversial, and it's still controversial, and it's been pilot projects with removing traffic from certain streets in the city center, and using the parking space for other things, such as outdoor furniture and bicycle lanes and urban nature. And I would, in all honesty, I think it's still a topic of discussion in our city, but at the same time there's a political will to do it, and so we are doing it. But one of the issues that I think is worth mentioning is that you need to think about how you make it still accessible for people in need of wheelchair, or to get businesses and especially craftsmen into the city center. And so we have some exceptions. So it's not it's not locked down, but it's not open for private parking in general in a lot of these areas. Now, even though it's still discussed and it's still controversial, I think we've reached sort of a point of no return as well, because people are using the spaces, and you see that the people living in our city love the transformation. So I don't think that, even though if we lose the next election, I don't think it will be reversed, to say it like that, because it's popular in the public what we have done, even though it's been largely debated.
Yeah, that's interesting that it is. There's an acceptance in Oslo that it's not. I think sometimes there's an impression that other places have done it, and people from Belfast can go there and see how it works. But there's a lot of pain almost to get to that point, and it is a controversial subject. And I think what you're saying is that you've got to work with people, and I get a sense too that it's not something that was done overnight either. It's still ongoing. And can you maybe talk a little bit more about the public transport investment? You have quite a sophisticated, integrated public transport system. We could see quite a lot of train lines coming into the central station and some of those images, but you've got a tram network. There's a lot of active travel. You use the fjord for ferries and bringing people from suburbs into the city centre. And has that helped to that big investment in public transport, an ongoing investment, as well as being more sustainable and helping to make a greener city, has that helped in terms of that debate about removing cars from some streets?
I will absolutely say so. And in addition to the tram and the trains and the ferries, we also have a subway and obviously buses. So the public transportation is quite well, and also we've built out bicycle lanes and made it easier to bicycle even in the winter. So when we see that there's an increasing number of people actually choosing the bicycle as well. So in combination, I think that's also made it easier to remove cars and to say that, well, you're most welcome in the city center, but don't bring your personal vehicle.
And can I say on vehicle, before I finish with vehicles, there's one type of vehicle which is fast growing in not just in Oslo but across Norway, and that's electric vehicles. And Oslo has been described as the electric vehicle capital of the world. So there has been a shift clearly from petrol and diesel cars to EVs in Norway generally. I think that the sales the majority of cars being sold in Norway are now electric vehicles. But how has the UK has set a target for the end of petrol and diesel vehicles being sold by 2030. I think one of the concerns that we have in this part of the world is that the infrastructure isn't in place to deal with that. And whilst people might have charging points at home, they're not always publicly accessible. So how has the city invested in that essential infrastructure to enable that? Because that's a huge shift over quite a short period of time. So there must have been a lot of money spent on the infrastructure, and do you see that continuing, and how successful has that been?
Well, I think it's been good, but I would say that we have still a lot of infrastructure building to do. There's not enough charging points at this point, but still probably better than a lot of other cities still. And then also in both Oslo and on a national level, we have had support for the investment in your house. So you can actually get funding to put up a charging in your house or in the apartment complex that you live in. I think that's also been quite essential to get that kind of support from the state or the city to do it in your home, because one thing is in the streets, but it's also a matter of how you manage it in the residential areas. But we still have a way to go, I would say, but it's moving, it's progressing in the right way.
That's slightly worrying for some of us in Belfast to hear that Oslo thinks it has quite a way to go, because I know that you're quite significantly ahead of where we are in terms of that public infrastructure, and I know that you have what would look like a petrol filling station, but is actually charging points for rapid charging points, and I don't think we haven't any of those yet. There are some.
No, but you have to see it in the context that we live in. 75% of all new cars now are EVs, the ones that are bought by the public. So the need is immense.
So you're a little bit behind where the demand is. But no, it's certainly something that I think we're in. There's a lot of what I think in your presentation and what we've been talking about is also just that little bit further advanced in its development than Belfast is, and I suppose we're trying to learn sort of lessons, or so that we don't make the mistakes, or we learn from your best practice. Something again, which you and I've talked about earlier, but it might be worth touching on now, is behind you. The graphic behind you is of the Barcode District, as it's known in Oslo, which is spectacular looking. It wasn't without controversy though when it was being built, and you had mentioned to me that it was the height of the buildings that were controversial. Now, in a global city sense, they're not the tallest buildings in the world. They're quite low, but it resonates in Belfast too, in that we have I suppose I'll describe it as a difficult relationship with height in the city, and historic sort of desire not to build higher than the dome of City Hall. There are some buildings, there are some areas where there are taller buildings as well. But how has the city grappled with that issue? How have you dealt with that height controversy? And is there a review in also starting to develop that if you want to develop sustainably, then you've got to have a bit more density. That might not mean huge skyscrapers that you would see in New York or London, but a little bit more density in the city core rather than urban sprawl. Is that something that is taking hold in Oslo?
Well, when you describe the situation in Belfast, I think it's quite similar to the discussions that we have in Oslo, and many people would say that the barcode behind me is skyscrapers, and as we know, in a global context, they are not. And when they were planned, the barcode was planned, there actually was a petition, 35,000 people signed it against the barcode and didn't want them to be this high as they are. Actually, now the picture is a few years back, and now we have a lot of buildings in front of the barcode. So I actually would say that the barcode should have been higher, because now it's kind of built in by other buildings. But I don't think that would have been popular in Oslo at that time anyway. But we have the same discussions. There's a sort of acceptance for a building higher in the city center. But when you get out of the city centers, there's the exact same debate as you are describing in Belfast. And we are looking into what is the climate-friendly way to do it. How can we be a dense city without being a city of skyscrapers? And I think this is an ongoing discussion, and probably won't be without controversy moving forward. But we do lack space, and this is an issue in almost every city. I think that we lack space for essential things, and if you want more people living in our cities, and we want all kinds of people with all kinds of income living in our city, I think density is obviously one of the answers to that, and then we have to be brave enough to build a little bit higher than we are used to. So I hope we will move in that direction, but I'm not certain.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting the way you put it, and I think that sometimes the debate gets very sort of binary around, do you like tall buildings or not tall buildings? And I think that, what we're talking about here is a dense city, not necessarily always a tall city. And there's a significant difference, and that's as much about utilizing space that's already developed, the upper floors of buildings that maybe aren't used for living or maybe abandoned or empty. So I think that's an interest. For small cities like ours, I think that's going to be an interesting debate moving forward, particularly if you want to be climate friendly. Suburban sprawl is not the way to do it. We need to be a bit denser. So again, we'll watch with interest as you develop and grow and grapple with that one as well. There have been some really, really good questions have come in from people. We've got a couple more minutes left. If anybody wants to put a final question or two to Victoria, but maybe I can maybe just go back to you mentioned Oslo's climate budget, which was something that was introduced when Oslo became Europe's green capital back in 2019. And how has that operated in practice? Is it something that is now ingrained in the city, and you mentioned it sits alongside the broader city budget. Is it something that is now established? And you mentioned collaboration with the private sector, and because obviously the private sector has a huge role to play. Business has a huge role to play in combating climate change and delivering on those targets that are in your climate budget. So how is that interaction worked?
Well, actually, the climate budget was introduced in 2016, so it was 3 years prior to the European Green Capital, and I think maybe also one of the things that made us the European Green Capital, because we had ambitious goals and we had a new tool that was not established in cities around the world. So it is established. We use it as a tool to plan what we should do, and how we should invest, and it is going hand in hand with the city budget, and it's presented at the same time as the city budget to the city council, and it's a really I think it's an innovative tool, and makes it easier for us to be able to achieve our ambitious goals. And in addition, I would underline that it's really important, if you can, within the limits of your legislation and how you manage your city, to use public procurements as a tool to get innovative solutions and to reach climate goals. And for us, we are, it's the city that builds the schools and the libraries and the museum and the kindergartens, and very, very many of the public buildings are indeed also built by the city. And that is why it's important for us to use procurements and to make demands, and to, in collaboration with the businesses and the private sector, find ways to achieve our goals, but also creating a market, because it's much easier to invest in a fossil-free machine if you know that that will give you the opportunity to solve more than one project for the city. So that is an important tool, I would say, to use that kind of innovative ways to organize, for example, public buildings being built.
Yeah. Thank you. And that relates to the question that's come in there around, has the city of Oslo worked with businesses to incentivize people to make that shift from, driving into the city centre to work to using public transport or more active travel methods, or has the city's role maybe been to invest in the public transport, to invest in that promenade, and so that there's the infrastructure is there, or has there been any sort of support of businesses to try to get people to make that shift?
Both, I would say. Obviously, we as a city are in charge of making the investments in public transportations and so on. But it's been important for us to have a really close dialogue with the business community, and for me, that was really important during the pandemic, but also on a general basis, to be able to create solutions together. Because even though we are the capital and we can make tough demands, we won't get anywhere without collaboration and without a good dialogue with the business community. And I think that's one of the key factors in the green shift.
Okay. And maybe one final question then, but before we let you go, it's comes from Deirdre McBride, and Deirdre's asking about there was a huge amount of investment has happened in Oslo and along the waterfront, and those iconic buildings in the Barcode District, and in some of the examples that you showed us, and you touched on it briefly around the port of Oslo leading some of those investments. So how has that? And obviously Norway and Oslo as a city has higher rates of tax than we would have here in Northern Ireland. You've also, it's quite a wealthy country, and everybody understands, that the oil and gas has inflated the coffers of Norway as a city. So there's a substantially richer country than many. But how has that financing of that redevelopment taken place? Has it been a sort of a mixture of public money, private money? How has that happened?
Well, it's been a mix. The public buildings are financed by us. The Port Promenade and a lot of the opera beach and things like that are financed by the port. And also the selling of property is indeed what is funding new investments in the port. So it's a collaboration. So you have private developers buying and building the private housing, and then that is what is funding our port development and port investments.
So it's a mixture. That's interesting. So, Victoria, can I thank you? That has maybe run on slightly longer than we had, but there's been a huge amount of interest. Lots of questions, and unfortunately there's some there that we haven't been able to get to, but can I thank you and your team at the City of Oslo for agreeing to do this event, to speak to an audience in Belfast. I'm sure we've all, I know I have, and hopefully others have learned a lot, and I think one of the big takeaways is lots and lots of things that are fascinating there, but I think that one of the great things to learn is that they are similar cities. They're different, but and also slightly bigger. But you are dealing with many of the same challenges, and you're a little bit further along that regeneration journey as we are. So that actually gives us much more to learn from you. You are very welcome in Belfast at any time, and there may be some things that you can learn from us as well. But can I thank you for agreeing to do this event and for the time that you and your team took to prepare for it. Thank you very, very much for that. And we're great that through the wonders of technology, people from Belfast have been able to briefly visit Oslo this morning. So thank you for everything. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. And can I also thank Padraig and the team at Planned Events for helping to make this morning go so smoothly. And can I also thank everybody for attending. Please go to our website. It's www.belfastchamber.com. And if you take a look there, you'll see some of the events, the other events that we have planned for the remainder of the year. And please feel free to register for those as well. Thank you all once again for coming. Victoria, thank you for your time and for your insights. And I look forward to seeing some of you again very soon at another Belfast Chamber event. Thank you.